Okay, let's go ahead and get started there, everybody. Welcome back to another 1 p.m. PST YouTube stream. I'm your host, Strangebro Jim, and today we are going to be getting back into some more Pega certification studying. We have some more videos to upload and, or make public for everybody to see. And then we got Final Fantasy VII later on tonight. So hopefully, if you're watching the stream right now, hopefully you'll stick around and enjoy the streaming session. Now, if you're just watching the Pega video itself, just on YouTube, then I welcome you to this video. Hopefully you'll find it very informative, and hopefully I'll get your continued support from here on out. But obviously, I have to kind of give you enough for you to understand, to support me for more. So let me explain who I am and what these videos are pretty much all about. Okay, so I myself am currently an unemployed software developer whose last position was with the Pega environment. The company that I worked for gave us an authorized training partner that, well, me and my 20 or so, 15, 20 or so peers really didn't get along very well with the gentleman, to the point where pretty much a good majority of us had gone self-study. Um, so, and no, if you're thinking along the lines of, well, this is just your opinion, uh, he messed up with his coworkers as well. The fact that his coworkers knew that, he had messed up as well. So it wasn't just us, okay, that he was causing problems for. So, um, uh, I and several others asked to be put back into another training cycle for Pega with a different authorized training partner so that we could learn Pega properly, but was rejected. The one and only time that I took the certification for 8.6, I was definitely not ready about that time. They basically pushed it on me early in my self-study, and well, I failed it, and I knew that I was going to fail it. I had not studied enough on the certifications to be absolutely certain that I would pass it. So, um, so I failed it. I mean, I could, if I had gotten 6 more questions right, I could have passed it. But let's face it, that's not exactly something to uh, aspire for. Um, so the um, so we were rejected on the additional training. I couldn't get the certification, but they pushed me into a contract anyway. So I hoped that maybe I could get some mentorship there, which, well, didn't happen. Or at least not the mentorship that I would have liked. They were willing and willing and able to answer my questions if I was to have any, but they weren't willing to do any kind of um, additional mentorship beyond that. So um, they pretty much put it all on my all on my shoulders, and well, I didn't do any more than I needed to on that. I should have continued going for self-study to get myself, you know, uh, knowledgeable enough um, to try the certification again and pass it. So that fell on me. Um, I'd wish that there was that you know we had been placed back into training, or I got in a little bit more mentorship. At, when we actually reached the contract job, but that didn't happen. So I never got around to getting my certification. I tried to take some steps during work, but it wasn't enough. So they laid me off, and well, I've been unemployed ever since. Um, you know, I'm hoping that, after I get done with this study session of these, you know, hour-long Pega sessions that I do, which, I mean, let's face it, I've done quite a lot already, um, that I would have enough locked in my brain to attempt the certification again and hope that I pass it. So, um, so yeah, that's what's kind of going on with this. Okay, so these videos are me going through the system architect mission, going through all the topics, going through all the challenges, learning everything that I possibly can, so that when I do take the certification, then I will be ready for it, or at least attempt to be ready for it as much as I can. Okay. Um, I'm not going to say that I'm going to pass it with 100%, but I mean, that's something to try to aim for. Okay. Know enough about it so that you do not struggle during the test. Okay. You know exactly what they're asking and what the correct answer would be. Obviously, if you've been watching my videos, I've messed up a couple times here and there. So it can't be, I'm not perfect on it. Not yet. So, um, I mean, can anybody really be perfect? Um, but if you're coming into these videos hoping that I am some kind of authorized training partner or this is meant for an instructor-led training, then I'm sorry to say, but no. These would hopefully be someone that knows Pega backwards and forwards and can teach you everything that there is to know about it. If you want to take the instructor-led training, then go ahead and do so. But it is a 2-week course for like $5,000, so you better get your money's worth out of it. It is a jam-packed study session from what I can see, um, and they're going to throw a lot at you. So you're going to want to be able to take notes, take video recordings, and ask a lot of questions because you want to make sure that you get everything that you possibly can to pass your certification with flying colors. That 2-week course hopefully will provide that for you, but make sure that you put in the effort as well. Make sure that you um, don't make that $5,000 worthless. Okay, you know. So it is not, you know, not exactly a cheap certification process, but um, now another point of note: if you are watching this, like later on YouTube, like if this is the very first video that you come upon and you're studying for the business architect, I'm sorry to say, it's already done. We've already covered the 2 missions and 2 modules. You're welcome to go to the playlist that I have specially for the Pega certification and go over the first 2 missions and 2 modules. It pretty much starts at the very beginning. So go through that so that you can take your business architect certification and hopefully you pass it. Now, I will recommend that these 2 modules covers the Pega Express delivery, and I do recommend that you go over the mission for Pega Express delivery because I feel like these 2 modules do not cover enough. Now, I'm doing it in 8.7 because there's other translated languages for 8.7. I feel that, if these videos reach an international audience, like, I have members from India, for example, subscribing and watching these, or at least I believe that they are. I want to make sure that, everybody has an opportunity to follow along with me. Okay. Granted, I speak in English. It's my only language. Sorry, if you're If you're like maybe German, and uh, hopefully you can catch every other word. You know, if your English isn't that great. But unfortunately, there's nothing for me to say. I don't have, I can't, I can't talk to you in multiple languages at the same time. So, that's just not, that's not something that I can do. So, hopefully you can follow along though, with at least the text for your language. So, hopefully you can understand my spoken English. So, let's get into the system architect, which is my main focus. I want to get that system architect certification so that I can put it on my resume and, get an actual job, again, for Pega, for the Pega environment. So, um, they, if I try to look for any kind of job right at this moment in time, they're going to be wanting that certification, no matter what. I mean, I would be, I mean, if you're a company right now, you're watching these videos and you are okay with helping me train for the certification, then you know, let me know, I'll send you my resume. Um, but most likely, a lot of companies don't do that anymore. So, which is very sad to see. Um, you know, training has definitely gone downhill the past couple decades. So, all right. Well, we've completed our module and challenge. Um, I've not gotten any emails from my past suggestions or past questions, so I still don't know what I can do for localizing the UI form. They have not replied back to me yet. I hope that they do because I can't complete this at this time. So, um, so we're going to move on to the simulated external data source. Now, okay, um, I can click the button saying that, hey, I did do it, but in all reality, I haven't. I haven't confirmed that the changes that I made to the XML did indeed do a full translation. I can't I can't check that with this challenge right at this moment in time. So there's not much I can really do about that. So um, most I can do is move on to the following modules and challenges and wait for their reply. I don't have that much left, um, but we are getting closer. So, and after that, then comes additional studies, taking mock exams, and getting prepped for the certification exam. So, and we'll kind of go over that more as the and as we get closer. So, don't need to cover it right now. I mean, unless you're absolutely ready for it right now, but I mean, I'm not. So, um, guess you'll just have to wait a little bit longer till I get to that point. So, okay, so we're on to simulated external data sources. So, simulation of external data source. Pega platform provides the ability to simulate external data sources. Simulating an external data source is useful in situations where the external system is unavailable. Okay, then why would you want to simulate it? You know, you can simulate an external data source as long as you know what data the source is expecting and returning. Simulating a data source with sample data allows you to develop and test applications without interruption until the concrete data from the source system or application is ready. Okay, so in other words, basically what they're saying is that, hey, um, while you're setting up your application and, um, you know, you're expecting to get in data from outside of that application in some form or another, whether it's a database, whether it's another application. You're expecting to have some form of input from another source. Um, so because you don't know what those details might necessarily be in actuality, like you can't, pull straight from that database, you're gonna have to kind of make um, like a temporary clone of it, basically saying, hey, this is what we're expecting. But, you know, um, in reality, you're gonna need to make sure that, you're probably gonna need to run this again when you actually get the real information. So, and obviously, you can't run your application without it. So, um, so hopefully, um, your external data source will be finished at least hopefully before yours needs to be live. Otherwise, you better not push it live. You're not gonna have anything to give to your clients if you don't have that external data source, right? So um, you can simulate your data source when the source system does not have data or the API is under development. For more information, see simulated data. For example, your team is building a weather widget. The team members building the user interface (UI) might want to see how their design works with sample weather data before other team members finish working on the connection to the data provider, or the external data source might not be available yet. Simulating the data source allows you to implement case processing before the external system is integrated. So, aka, like, hey, your application, needs to run, right? You need to verify that, your application runs properly with the data that is provided from that external system. But you don't have the information being provided from the external system to run your application. So you're basically going to need to make little mock information to be sent to your application. Okay. Um, so, you know, so in reality, you're hoping for, an actual address, you know, of like, hey, this person is from Los Angeles, California, or something like that, right? When in fact, you don't have that information yet. So you're gonna basically going, hey, I'm gonna, pull information and say that, or I'm gonna have a little mock information and say this is from San Andreas, or whatever. Um, little uh, Grand Theft Auto reference there, if you want. Um, but that's my point though, is that you can still kind of have like mock-up data being presented into the application so you can use it to see whether or not your application runs properly. If you're not getting that information and if you're not testing it, you know, um, let's say external systems taking a long time. It's taking a long time. It's taking a long time. You say that your application is ready to go. Okay, you're ready for it to go live. Okay, and they tell you, okay, as soon as that external system is up online, you need to be up online. Okay, and that's a scary thought, because what happens if the external system sends you data that you're not ready for? Okay, maybe they send it in an improper way, or they don't send you the data in the right order, or in the um, the data types that you're expecting, you don't know. Okay. So, or at least, you know, you can't be like 100% sure, right? Obviously they'll provide, they should be providing you with information as to, what everything that they are gonna be sending to you, but is that gonna be factually true or not is another thing altogether, right? Um, but you get the information, um, and you bring your application up online, and everything goes wrong. You start having a lot of misinformation. Everything's being displayed improperly, like your streets in the city, your cities in the county. You have no zip code, or whatever. You know, um, or like maybe it's displaying the last four digits of the zip code instead of like the full zip code. Don't know. Okay. There could be a lot of problems going live like right then and there, right? Um, because you might not be, um, they might have messed up on their end on what data they're sending, right? So you, on your application, you're gonna have to make sure that you um, see what they're sending and try to figure out what happened and try to fix the problem. Hopefully, you don't have to do that live, because then a lot of people are going to be pissed off at you. Okay? Um, so that's why you want to have little mock data that can be sent into your application, and you can test it. And make sure that you can test, you test it thoroughly. Test, for bad data. Make sure you test for bad data. If you don't, then, well, you could potentially have even more problems than what the external system is providing you. You know, like what if the external system is sending you completely bad data? Like, whatever happened to your database, like maybe the database is full of um, you know, um, data used by hackers or something like that. They use specific, SQL commands that, could potentially mess up your application, you know. Um, you know, who knows, right? You never know. Um, hopefully you'll have everything secured, but you know, there's a lot that can ride on something like that. So you want to make sure that you got all the T's crossed and I's dotted. So, okay, so testing with simulated data. External data source simulation is also useful for unit testing, as you can dictate the returned response. Develop and test your application with different source data samples as you wait for development work on the source system or work on the Pega platform interface to the source system. Check your knowledge with the following interaction. You simulate an external data source when the source system is not ready or still in development. Yep. Okay, simulated source confirmation or configuration. When you know that data, uh, when you know what data the external data source is going to return, you can use a data view to simulate an external data source that is not yet defined. App Studio Integration Designer. In App Studio, you can view a list of simulated data pages, also called data views, from the Designation Designer or Integration Designer. In App Studio, select Data Objects and Integrations to open the Integration Designer. You can enter a simulated data object name in the search box to enter the data objects and find the simulated data views quickly. In App Studio, when you create a data view, you identify the source of the data. The same data views are created regardless of whether you simulate the source data or connect to a system record, actual data. So in this one, you're basically saying, hey, we're just creating some simulated sources here. We're going to make some really, we're going to make some false records that we will use to test our application with. Otherwise, we would connect to an actual system record. So you can add sample source data or records to the data object and configure the view to access the simulated data source. As best practice, use App Studio to simulate the data object. DevStudio is available for advanced configurations, such as when you need to source the data directly from a data page. DevStudio view external data entities. Use DevStudio to get an overview of simulated data pages in your application. In DevStudio, click Configure Data Model, view external data entities to open the landing page and get an overview of simulated data pages in your application. Source systems marked with a green dot are production ready. Source systems marked with an orange triangle are simulated. DevStudio simulate data source. Use DevStudio to simulate the data source directly on the data page. You select the simulated data source option on the data page to simulate the data source. Then enter or select the name of the system to use for simulated data. You can simulate a data page by using a data transform, activity, report definition, or lookup. Selecting simulation disables any data source configured. Okay. For example, stakeholders want to simulate the process of providing a list of roadside assistance service providers. For a service provider data object, you create a data view with a simulated source for service providers, the underscore service provider list. You add sample service provider records to the service provider data object and then reference the simulated data source on the data view to populate the service provider drop-down field with sample records. Note: you may need to create sample data for your application. You can provide the sample data from a lookup, a data transform, or load activity. The sample data should include values to populate all the properties that the page, section, or other component referencing the data page requires. For more information on creating sample data, see creating a data type in DevStudio. So check your knowledge with the following interaction. When do you simulate an external data source? So you simulate a data source for error handling. Yeah, kind of, but not quite there. Um, you want to check to see if you have any errors, but it's not for error handling. So that's why I'm not selecting that one. Simulate an external data source even when the data source is available. No, if the data source is available, you should be using, well, you got to be careful with that because um, you you should probably still use a simulating an external data source to test out. I mean, you can use the data source as a reference to, actual external data, to the actual external data source, but you wouldn't want to potentially use the data source directly because if you're using the data source directly, then that means that you have the potential of changing customer records without, like, the customer's approval or something like that. Like, say, you want to test to see whether or not the banking system works correctly, right? So you're like, okay, I should do a withdrawal. Well, if you're using actual data source, then you're potentially removing money from that particular, um, you know, you're removing money from the um, from the account holder's, savings account, for example, right? So you're potentially screwing over the actual customers, you know, of say a banking system. So you don't really want to use the data source directly as a testing bed, if you get what I'm saying. You know, you can use it if there's no way to change it. Like you get the information and it just uses it, but doesn't actually change the information. So like say you're using a system that just has the customer data, their name, the address, their telephone number, their state, their city, their zip, but it gets sent to you, but nothing gets sent back to change it, right? Then then that might be okay to use the data source, that might be fine because you're just taking it to display information, for example, right? You're not actually changing anything within that data source. As soon as you start changing things from that data source, then you probably don't really want to use a real data source. So, so um, this would be a correct answer, but I doubt that it's the answer that they're looking for. So, um, so it's like this should still be an answer that you should be still accepting a little, as a caveat, but I doubt that this is what they're looking for this. So, simulate data source when you do not know the response. Know the response from what? From the actual live data, external data source, or the response of the application. If you don't know the response from the application itself, you got bigger problems than the external data source. So I don't think that that's correct and the correct answer. Simulate the external data source when you want to dictate the response data. Again, that one doesn't really match very well, does it? Um, None of these are really that great. Hmm. I mean, it seems like that second one seems like the best answer, but I kind of doubt it. You know, simulate the external data source when you want to dictate response data? What do you mean by that? Okay, I'm gonna check this one. I doubt that it's right. Yeah, okay. Um, Simulation is not required if the external data source is available. No, it probably should be required. Um, you still might want it for testing purposes. And they should address that. Okay. I don't know what they're going for on this one, to be honest. Um, Maybe for error handling. Nope. Yeah. Okay. I don't know what they're trying to go for on this one. So when you don't know the response, simulation with knowing the proper response may give you incorrect results. Great. Okay. What is this? When you know the response data. Simulating an external data source helps to unit test the implementation. But you're not. I have a problem with this question here. Here, I'm gonna go ahead and clip it here. Let's go ahead and put in a suggestion on this one because it's like, wait, what are you trying to go for on this one? All right. So simulate an external data source when you want to dictate the response data. Here, let me. Maybe my definition of dictate is not lining up. So let me look it up again. Um, an order principle that must be obeyed, lay down authority, prescribes, say or read it out loud. Yeah, so um, but I mean that's not the reason why you want to have an external data source. Or, you don't simulating an external data source doesn't mean that you're trying to dictate what the response is going to be from the application or this response from the external data source. That, no, that, okay, here. Um, let's discuss this. Let's talk to them about this because um, so I have a couple of problems with this answer, question and answer. Uh, First problem. Let me bring this up again. Um, there are times when you want to use a simulated external data source to test the application. You do not want to use the actual live data of, say, customers' checking or savings account when you want to test on whether your deposits or withdrawals from the system work okay. So the answer, simulate an external data source even when the data source is available, is a correct choice. The fact that it is wrong is giving a bad impression on how to test your application properly. Second issue is the correct answer. What do you mean by dictate the response data? Your application will have response data, but you don't need to simulate an external data source to make sure of that. Um, um, and your application wouldn't necessarily dictate the response from um, the true external data source, because if you are using a third party data source, then it is up to them on what they will send out. So you can't dictate what they can send either. Um, so I feel that these answers miss the mark altogether. I would recommend an answer rework. All right. Now normally I'd be like, oh my gosh, it's almost time for the Unreal. I'm gonna be late with working with Blackheart, but it's Blackheart's day off today, so we don't necessarily need to worry about that. So we're just gonna go, relaxed into the module quiz. We'll take the module quiz, and then we'll be done with our Pega setting for today. So kind of take it relaxed and not stress about it. 10 minutes for 3 questions. They're very inconsistent with their timing and their module quizzes. So I've seen 3 questions and it's like, you know, 5 minutes long. So it's like, okay. In which of the following situations do you simulate a data source for a data view? When you want to simulate a large amount of data, when the data page writes data to an external system, when performance testing and integration, when the interface between application and external data provider is not finalized. Yeah, that one. Um, okay, identify the 3 valid options for simulating data for unit testing during application development. So, um, wait, huh? Okay, this is a bit weird. Um, I don't think it's decision table, and I don't think it's report definition, so I think it's these 3. Data transform, lookup, and connector, but let's double check. Okay, not connector. Okay. Simulation populates a data view for test data if the connector for the data source is not yet configured. Okay. But obviously the use of data transform return one or more items for a data view for 1 is true. Use a lookup to return information about a single item is also true. So, um, I don't think it's decision table because that's typically more along the lines of you're testing information out, not necessarily needed for simulating data. I mean, good for unit testing, but not necessarily used for making sure that you're simulating data. Um, so let me go with report definition on this one. I don't know. Um, I'm not 100% sure on that one. In a fraud detection application, the get payment information external data source checks the credit card expiration based on the card ID. When developing the Pega platform application, which 3 of the following options can you configure the payment information data object in App Studio? Choose 3. My gosh. Okay. If the payment information data object does not exist, create a new payment information data object by using the data object wizard to define a simulated source. Okay, I don't know if you really need to do that, but The payment information data object exists. Configure the get payment information data view with a simulated data source that uses a data transform response. Well, hold on. In fraud detection application, the get payment information external data source checks the credit card expiration based on the card ID. When developing the Pega platform application, when three of the following options can you use to configure the payment information data object in App Studio? Hmm. Oh boy, this might be a little rough here. If the payment information data object does not exist, create a new payment information data object by using the data object wizard to define the source data later. Well, I mean, isn't creating a new payment information data object the whole point of the payment information data object? So I don't think that this is correct. The payment information data object exists. Configure the payment information data view to source simulated data from the Pega database. I don't think that one is. Okay. If the payment information data object exists, wait for the team to provide the external data source. Hmm. I I don't know, guys. This is they want me to choose three, but okay. So we have the get payment information external data source, right? Um, you know, whether or not that's been created or not, who knows? They haven't really specified that completely, right? So when developing the Pega platform application, which three of the following options can you use to configure the payment information data object in App Studio? So the payment information is basically getting the information from the get payment information external data source. So to basically hold on to that information, right? So if the payment information data object does not exist, create a new payment information data object by using the data object wizard to define a simulated source. Um, but why would you want to simulate and define a simulated source though? If you're getting data from the get payment information, you don't necessarily need to use a simulated source. So this one seems wrong, right? If the payment information data object exists, configure the get payment information data view with a simulated data source that uses a data transform response. Again, why would you want to use a simulated data source when the get payment information external data source is already there? So again, this doesn't necessarily make that much sense to me. Why you would want to use this one? Why would you want to use a simulated data source when you already have the get payment information? If this is meant to be an application that you are using, perfectly fine without any kind of problems whatsoever, then you wouldn't want to use a simulated data source at all. So, um, and they don't state that the get payment information external data source hasn't been created yet. So one could make the assumption that, this data source is active and you can use it. So the simulated data source shouldn't be a thing. So if the payment information data object does not exist, okay, create a new payment information data object by using the data object wizard to define the source data later. I mean, sure, but I mean, wouldn't you want to have the source data information like right then and there for the payment information data object? That one doesn't seem that correct to me, but I mean, it feels like the best one out of the three so far. If the payment information data object exists, okay, configure the payment information data view, okay, that shows the data object, sure, to source simulated data from the Pega database. Why? Why? Um, everything that's showing the simulated data source is like, what's the point of the get payment information then? You don't need a simulated data source, you know. If this wasn't available, then sure, simulated data source. That's perfectly fine, but we don't know that. Um, um, okay. I'm gonna make the assumption right at this moment in time that the get payment information external data source does not is not ready yet. Okay. So technically, if it's not ready yet, then this should be fine, right? You know, they're using this and you know, you're configuring the data view with a simulated data source to use the data transform response to, you know, put into the payment information. That seems like a reasonable thing that you want to do, right? Um, so, you know, if one hasn't been made yet, then you want to make sure that you are making one, and you know, so that you can, you know, eventually provide the source data later. That again should make sense, right? So, um, um, if the payment information data object exists, configure the payment information data view to source simulated data from the Pega database. No, that shouldn't be a thing. And you shouldn't necessarily wait for an external data source. So, but here's the thing. This one here and this one here kind of counter each other, okay? Because this one is saying, you know, you create a new payment information data object by using the data object wizard to define a simulated source, which, you know, that should work well with the second one, right? But it doesn't necessarily work well with the third. I don't know, man. This. I really don't like these answers right at the moment. Okay, I'm gonna try these three. I don't know, to be honest. Their question and their answers here feel very disjointed. So, I mean, feel free to, you know, let me know if you didn't have any problems with this particular question whatsoever, or if you're kind of with me on like, hey, this doesn't feel correct. But hey, we got two wrong answers. Well, look at there. So apparently all three of these are correct here. Um, you cannot define a simulated source from the data object wizard. Okay. Hold on. I want to check on that real quick. So, data object wizard. Really? Um, Let me just type in wizard. That's not there either. Okay, so how are we supposed to know this? You didn't state anything about this wizard in the previous topic at all. So that's a problem. When the connector is available, the project team can update the payment information data type source to a REST service. You do not have to wait for the team to provide a source before you configure the payment information data type. Um, um, I mean, they're technically correct on number five. So, that's the reason why I was very hesitant on that. But I was looking at these other two and I was like, going, this isn't. Those don't feel correct at all either. And the payment information data type already exists. The data source is not, but the data source is not configured. You create the simulated source on the data view. Um, okay. Why do you have two different data views? Okay. Um, let me come back to this in just a minute here. I doubt that I got 100% on it with that second question. Oh, I did. I did get 100%. Okay. Um, let's relook at this one here. Okay, so they are stating that this one isn't correct, which I mean I get it. You don't really want to you don't necessarily want to wait for an external data source. So I get that one. Um, um, And they say that you can't define it with a simulated source. So therefore, these three are their correct answers, right? Okay, let's see what they say here. So for 2, you can add sample source data to the data object and configure the data view to use the Pega database as a simulated data source. Um, okay. Um, let's see. If the payment information data object exists, configure the get payment information data view with a simulated data source that uses a data transform response. The payment information data type already exists, but the data source is not configured. You can create a simulated source on the data view. If the payment information data object does not exist when you create a new data object using the data object wizard, you can choose later as a define source data option. Then in the data view, define the source with the simulation. Okay, so I need to send a response. I need to send a suggestion on this because um, here actually let me reload here real quick. I want to get a screenshot of the wrong information. So I know that that one is wrong. So um, that one is, and that one is the wrong one. So there we go. So I need to take a screenshot of all this. So this is going to be a really large picture here. Okay. Okay. Let me make sure that I get the right file. So in the attached image, I'm showing an incorrect answer. However, here is the problem. The answer was never formally stated within the within the previous topic. So how were we supposed to know that you can't add a simulated source to in the data wizard. Or data object wizard. The question itself felt very confusing when I was first looking at it. Because it felt like the external data source was live, so it felt odd that you were creating simulated sources for a live application. I had to later change my thought line. I'm messing up on the word there. That doesn't seem right. Yeah, I knew that I was messing up on that. Change my thought line. Thinking that the external data source wasn't complete. Hence the need for the simulated sources heavily mentioned in the answers. Would recommend maybe a clear question and answer somehow. Okay. But we've already kind of taken care of this one, so but um yeah, when it's not finalized, yeah, makes perfect sense. No problems on that one. Um it was data transform connector, or wait, hold on. Oh, I forget. That was it. Use the data transform to return one or more items for the data view. Use a report definition to return a list of items. And use a lookup to return information about a single item. So, connector is more, trying to connect to an external database. So you wouldn't necessarily use that to simulate data. And again, decision table is mostly used for testing the, you know, testing what you're doing kind of thing, testing out the data itself. So, um, but, data transform, lookup, this third and this, well, fourth answer here, the report definition, that's the one that kind of throws me off here. Use a report definition to return a list of items. So yeah. Okay. We've already completed it, so we don't really need to worry about that anymore. We're going to go ahead and end this particular module study session. I had a little bit of trouble myself on that there, folks. I feel as though they probably could have done a better job on the questions and, um, been a little bit more clear on what they were trying to go for on that. Um, so that's why it kind of was throwing me off on it. But unfortunately, these are the kind of questions that you should be expecting on the certification. Okay. Um, so it's gonna be rough. Okay. The fact that I faced questions that had Pega 7 keywords in there for the Pega 8.6 certification, just goes to show that you got a lot to deal with when you are working on the certification itself. So be prepared for the worst, okay? Or at least just be prepared. So, but that's going to be it for the Pega study session for today. We're going to go ahead and switch on off and switch on over to the video uploads. I want to thank you for stopping on by and watching today's video. If you're watching this later on YouTube, then I want to thank you for uh, joining me for this. Feel free to like, subscribe, and do all the things that are necessary for the YouTube algorithm. That would be fantastic. That would help me out a lot. Um, Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you'll come back for either tomorrow's stream or the next video. look forward to it, and that's it. So thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it. Hopefully I catch you next time. Until then, take care, have a good night, stay healthy, stay safe, and I'll catch you strangers next time.